is a gate at the edge of the city. You can see it from the road. A massive thing, stone on stone, arch above arch, wide enough for wagons and merchants and whole flocks of sheep pressed together in the heat. The crowd moves through it the way water moves through an open canal. Steady, effortless. Nobody slows down. Nobody stops to ask directions. The road here is worn smooth from 10,000 feet, and the gate is open, and the city is ahead, and everything about this moment says, this is the way. You take the wide gate. Of course you do. Then you hear a voice behind you. It is the voice of a man from Galilee, standing on a hillside, talking to anyone willing to stop and listen. He is not whispering. He is not hedging. He is looking at the road you just took. The smooth road, the easy road, the road with everybody on it. And he says something that will follow you for the rest of your life. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Matthew 7:13 and 14. One of the most quoted passages in the New Testament. One of the most preached, one of the most misunderstood, because most people who hear this passage hear the same thing. Try harder. They hear Jesus saying that the Christian life is difficult, that you have to struggle and sacrifice, that the gate is small and you need to make yourself smaller to fit through it. And they walk away feeling guilty or overwhelmed or quietly certain that they are probably on the wrong road and do not know how to get to the right one. But here is what most people miss. The Greek is not saying what the English makes you think it is saying. There is a word buried inside this verse. A single Greek word that changes everything you thought Jesus was asking you to do. It changes the geometry of the gate. It changes the nature of the road. It changes what it means to find the life Jesus is describing. We will get to that word, but not yet. First, you need to stand on that hillside with him. You need to see what he sees. Because Jesus is not looking at a metaphor. He is looking at real gates in a real city that every person in his audience had walked through. And when they heard him say wide gate and narrow gate, something clicked for them that has been almost entirely lost in 20 centuries of translation. Let's recover it. To understand what Jesus is saying, you have to understand what a first-century city gate actually was. It was not a door. It was not a small wooden thing you pushed open with one hand. A city gate in the ancient Near East was an architectural statement. It was a declaration of power. The gates of Jerusalem, described in extraordinary detail by the Jewish historian Josephus in his work on the Jewish War, were massive stone structures, wide enough to allow carts, livestock, and columns of soldiers to pass through simultaneously. Some of the main gates of the Temple Mount were so large that Josephus records it took 20 men to move them. The gate was where commerce happened. It was where legal disputes were settled. It was where the city announced itself to the world. When Jesus says wide is the gate, his audience does not picture a slightly oversized doorway. They picture the main entrance to a walled city. They picture ease of access. They picture a place designed to welcome everyone, to let everyone in, to make entry as frictionless as possible. And into that picture, Jesus plants a question nobody in the crowd expected. What if the gate that welcomes everyone leads nowhere you want to go? The Greek word behind wide here is eurikaros. It means spacious, roomy, unrestricted. It carries the sense of open country, of a place with no walls pressing in, no friction, no resistance. The wide gate opens onto a Eurycharos road, a road with room for everyone, room for everything, room for all your preferences and all your compromises and all your reasons why this is good enough. Stay with me. Because Jesus is not condemning pleasure. He is not condemning comfort. He is making an architectural observation about destination. The wide road is not wide because it is sinful. It is wide because it asks nothing of you at the entry point. And a gate that asks nothing of you is a gate that leads to nothing for you. This is where most sermons stop. They describe the wide road in dark colors. They paint the crowd on it as villains, as people who know they are choosing destruction and are choosing it anyway. But that is not what Jesus says. Jesus says many enter through it, not many evil people, not many who hate God. Ordinary people, people who look at the two gates and choose the one that looks most reasonable. You have done this. So have I, Peter. The man who would become the first spokesman of the early church, the man whose name means rock, walked the wide road for years. He denied Jesus 3 times in a single night, standing by a charcoal fire while a servant girl asked him a question he could not face. He chose the easy answer. He chose the wide gate. And the road he walked that night led him to the worst morning of his life. Standing by the sea, staring at the water, a man who had lost himself entirely. Augustine of Hippo, writing his Confessions in the 4th century, described his own years on the wide road with an honesty that still cuts. He was brilliant. He was educated. He was, by every external measure, successful. And he was, by his own admission, restless in a way that nothing on the wide road could fix. He prayed a prayer that has haunted Christians ever since. Not because it was holy, but because it was honest. He asked God to make him faithful, and then asked God to wait a little while longer. That is the wide road, not a road of monsters, a road of people who are not quite ready. People who keep meaning to take the other gate, people for whom the wide one is just easier. For now watch what happens next. Because the Greek word Jesus uses for the road that leads to destruction is apolia. It means ruin, waste, perdition. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. It is the exact same word John uses in his Gospel when he describes Judas Iscariot. Judas is called the son of apolia, the son of destruction, the son of the wide road. Judas did not start out as a villain. He started out as a disciple. He walked with Jesus for 3 years. He heard every sermon, including this one. He saw every miracle. And somewhere along the way, he kept choosing the gate that asked a little less of him. The gate that let him keep his hand in the money bag, keep his options open, keep one foot on the road he already knew. The wide gate does not announce itself as destruction. It announces itself as reasonable. And that is the trap. Now we get to the Greek. And I want you to pay close attention here, because this is the part that most English translations, even the good ones, cannot fully carry across the 2,000-year gap between the hillside in Galilee and the screen you're watching this on. Jesus uses 2 different Greek words in Matthew 7:13 and 14 that almost always get collapsed into one English word. And when they get collapsed, something essential disappears. The first word is pyle. That is the word translated gate. And pyle in 1st century Greek does not mean a small personal door. It does not mean the side entrance to a building or the little wooden gate on a garden fence. Pyle is a city gate, a municipal gate, the kind of gate that Josephus describes when he catalogues the entrances to the Temple Mount. Massive, load-bearing, architecturally significant structures that controlled the flow of entire populations. When Jesus says, enter through the narrow pyle, he is not asking you to squeeze yourself small. He is asking you to choose a different entry point into the city. This matters more than it sounds. Because a pyle is not about the size of your body. It is about access. It is about authorization. In the ancient world, different gates gave access to different parts of the city. And different gates had different requirements. The sheep gate in Jerusalem, described in the 3rd chapter of Nehemiah, was the gate through which sacrificial animals were brought into the city. It was a working gate, a purposeful gate. Not the grand ceremonial entrance, but the gate that led to the altar. Here is what most people miss. Jesus is not telling you that you are too large for the gate. He is telling you that you are standing in front of the wrong one. Now the second word. And this is the one that changes everything. The Greek word behind narrow, the word that describes both the gate and the road, is built from the root thlibo. Say it slowly. Thlibo. It means to press, to squeeze, to crush under pressure, to afflict. And it is the root of one of the most important words in Paul's entire theological vocabulary, thlipsis, which your English Bible translates as tribulation, as suffering, as affliction, as the pressure that comes from being pressed on every side. Paul uses thlipsis in Romans chapter 5 when he writes that we also glory in our sufferings, because suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. He uses it in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 when he says we are hard pressed on every side. The Greek there is a form of thlibo, but not crushed, pressed, but not destroyed. The narrow road is not narrow because it is unpleasant. It is narrow because it is the road of thlipsis, the road of being pressed, the road of pressure and formation and the slow, costly work of becoming someone whose character can hold the weight of eternity. And here is the part nobody tells you. The pressing is not punishment. It is craft. When a goldsmith presses gold, when he subjects it to heat and pressure and the friction of the refining process, he is not punishing the gold. He is making it into something that can be used. The narrow road does the same thing to you. It does not press you because God is cruel. It presses you because God is a craftsman. And the thing he is making is a human soul capable of bearing the full weight of his glory. This is what the wide road cannot offer you. Not because the wide road is sinful, but because it never presses you. It never forms you. It never makes you into anything except a slightly more comfortable version of what you already were. Think about the merchant who entered Jerusalem through one of its smaller working gates rather than the grand ceremonial entrance. He was not lesser for it. He was purposeful. He knew where he was going. He had business inside that required a specific kind of access, and he took the gate that gave it to him. Not the gate that made him look impressive on the way in. That is the narrow gate, not humiliating, not crushing, purposeful. And now that you understand what the gate actually is and what the road actually costs, you are ready for the sentence that has troubled careful readers of this passage for 2,000 years. Jesus says, only a few find it. Not a few choose it. Not a few deserve it. Not a few are allowed in. A few find it. Find it. That is the word Jesus chooses. Not take it, not earn it, not deserve it. He says, find it. In Greek, the word is heurisko, and heurisko is not a passive word. It is not the word you use when something falls into your lap. It is not the word for stumbling across something on the road by accident, the way you might find a coin in the street without looking for it. Heurisko is the word for the kind of finding that follows seeking. Active, intentional, costly seeking. It is the same word Jesus uses 3 chapters earlier in Matthew when he says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. Seek, zato, find. Heurisko. The 2 words belong together the way a question belongs with its answer. You do not heurisko something you were not first zatoing. Pay attention to this, because this single word dismantles 2 of the most common misreadings of this passage at the same time. The first misreading is the one that makes people feel guilty, the reading that says the narrow gate is for the spiritually elite, for the disciplined, for the people who have their lives sufficiently arranged, for the people who have already done the work of becoming worthy. And if you are not one of those people, if you are still struggling, still failing, still standing in the broad road with the crowd, then perhaps the narrow gate was never meant for you. That reading is wrong. And heurisco is why it is wrong, because finding requires seeking, and seeking is available to everyone. The gate does not sort by achievement. It sorts by direction. Are you turned toward it? Are you moving toward it? Are you asking, in whatever broken and halting way you have available to you, where it is? Then you are already doing the thing Jesus describes. You are already in the motion of heurisco. The second misreading is the one that makes people feel smug. The reading that says, I know where the narrow gate is. I was raised in the church. I know the correct doctrines. I have the right theology. I am certainly not on the wide road with all those people who do not know what I know. The narrow gate is obvious to me. I walked through it years ago and have not thought about it since. That reading is also wrong. And heurisco is why it is also wrong. Because heurisco is present tense, active voice. It describes an ongoing posture, not a completed transaction. The few who find the narrow gate are not the few who found it once and filed the paperwork. They are the few who keep orienting themselves toward it, who keep asking where it is, who keep noticing when they have drifted toward the wide road and keep making the choice. Sometimes daily, sometimes hourly, to turn back. Augustine understood this in a way that took him most of his life to admit. He was 43 years old when he finished his Confessions. By that point he had been a Christian for nearly a decade. And still, he wrote about the narrow road, not as a destination he had safely reached, but as a direction he was learning, slowly and painfully, to keep choosing. He described the wide road not as something he had left cleanly behind, but as something that kept appearing in front of him, smooth and reasonable and wearing the face of something he used to love. That is the honest testimony of a man who understood heurisco. Now here is where the passage becomes something that should make you stop entirely. Jesus says only a few find it. Not most, not many. Few. And the Greek word is oligoi, a word that means small in number, limited. Not what you would expect given the size of the invitation. Jesus has just spent 7 chapters of Matthew telling people about a kingdom that is open to the poor in spirit, the mourners, the meek, the hungry, the merciful, the pure in heart, the peacemakers, the persecuted. He has described a God who sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous alike. He has described a Father who sees in secret and rewards openly. He has described a kingdom of extraordinary, almost reckless generosity. And then he says, few find the gate to it. This is not a contradiction, but it feels like one. And if it does not feel like one to you, you are probably not reading it carefully enough. The gate is not narrow because God is withholding. The gate is narrow because finding requires seeking, and most people. Not evil people, not cruel people, ordinary people with ordinary lives and ordinary distractions. Most people never quite get around to the seeking. They intend to. They mean to. They tell themselves they will when things settle down, when the season changes, when they feel more ready, when the road they are already on starts to show them clearly where it ends. Peter knew this feeling. After the resurrection. After the charcoal fire and the 3 denials and the worst morning of his life, Jesus found him by the sea and asked him the same question 3 times. Do you love me? 3 times. Once for each denial. And each time Peter answered, something in him that had been closed by the wide road was pressed open again by the narrow one. That is thlibo. That is the pressing. That is what the narrow road does to you when you are brave enough to stay on it long enough for it to do its work. And now that you understand the gate and the road and the word for finding, you are ready for the moment this passage has been building toward since Jesus opened his mouth on that hillside. Because there is one more thing. The narrow gate is not just a place you go through. It is a person. In the 10th chapter of John's Gospel, Jesus says something that most readers of Matthew 7 have never connected to the narrow gate. He says, I am the gate. The Greek word John uses is Pile, the same word. The exact same word Jesus used on the hillside in Matthew 7. Wide pile, narrow pile. And now, I am the pile. This is not a coincidence. In the ancient world, authors do not repeat significant vocabulary accidentally. John, who was there on the hillside, who heard the Sermon on the Mount with his own ears, who spent 3 years watching Jesus choose every word with the precision of a man who knew that words outlive the people who speak them. John chose pile deliberately. He wanted you to make the connection. He wanted you to read Matthew 7:13 and John 10:9 together, side by side, and feel the force of what that combination means. The narrow gate is not a place. And here is where the word we planted at the beginning of this video, the word we said would change everything, finally comes into full view. Heurisco, to find, active, intentional, costly seeking that ends in discovery. Jesus does not say, build the narrow gate. He does not say, deserve the narrow gate. He does not say, understand the narrow gate well enough to explain it to other people. He says, find it, heurisco it, seek it the way a woman seeks a lost coin, turning the whole house over until she holds it in her hand. Seek it the way a merchant seeks a pearl of great price, selling everything he owns because he has seen something worth more than everything he owns. And the thing you are seeking is not a theological position. It is not a church membership. It is not a moral standard you have successfully maintained. The thing you are seeking is a person who said, with his own mouth, in his own language, using his own word, I am the gate. Come through me. Now hold that thought, because I want to take you somewhere you may not have expected this video to go. The night before Jesus was crucified, he was pressed. The Greek word in Gethsemane, the word that describes what happened to Jesus in that garden while his disciples slept, is agonia, agony. But the physical description that surrounds it in Luke's Gospel carries the full weight of thlibo. He sweat drops of blood. His body was under a pressure so extreme that the capillaries beneath his skin began to rupture. He was being pressed. Thlibo. Before the pressing had even officially begun. And then it began. The soldiers came. The arrest. The trials. The beating that left him unrecognizable. The road to Golgotha. A road that was by any reasonable human measure the narrowest road any person has ever walked. A road that asked everything. A road that pressed until there was nothing left to press. He walked it anyway. And on the other side of that road, on the other side of the cross and the tomb and the silence of Holy Saturday, there was a gate. And the few who found it were not the powerful. They were not the theologically sophisticated. They were not the people who had performed the narrow road correctly from the beginning. They were a grieving woman in a garden who thought she was talking to a gardener. They were 2 men on a road to Emmaus whose hearts burned inside them before they understood why. They were 11 men in a locked room, afraid of everything, who suddenly found themselves standing in front of the person they thought they had lost forever. Heurisco, found. Not by achieving, not by deserving. Found, by turning toward the voice that kept calling their names. And here is the thing about the narrow gate that should reorder everything you thought you knew about this passage. You are not trying to squeeze yourself through a crack in a wall. You are not trying to make yourself small enough, good enough, disciplined enough to fit through an opening that was designed to exclude most people. That is not what Jesus is describing. That has never been what Jesus is describing. The narrow gate is narrow because it is a person. And a person is more specific than a philosophy. You cannot enter through a person the way you enter through a wide civic gate that accepts everyone regardless of where they are going or why. You have to turn toward him specifically. You have to seek him, heurisco him, specifically. You have to say, out loud, or in the silence of your own chest, this is the one I am going through. not the wide road of keeping my options open, not the broad gate of meaning to decide later. Him. Now, that specificity is what makes the gate narrow. Not cruelty, not exclusion, not a God who designed the entry point to be as difficult as possible to reach. Specificity. The narrow gate is narrow the way a name is narrow. The way your name. Your actual name, the one your mother gave you, is narrower than person or human or one of the many. The narrow gate knows your name, and it is asking you to know its. Peter knew this, standing by the sea. Hearing his name spoken by the one he had denied, Peter understood that the narrow road he had been avoiding was not a road away from comfort. It was a road toward the only person who had ever looked at him, really looked at him, and chosen him anyway. Augustine knew this. After years on the wide road, after all the philosophy and all the achievement and all the restlessness, he wrote the sentence that has outlasted almost everything else he ever wrote. He wrote it not as a theological proposition, but as a confession wrung out of a man who had finally exhausted, turned toward the narrow gate. Our heart is restless until it rests in you. That is heurisco. That is finding. That is the narrow gate. Finally. Fully seen. So let's bring this home. Three things to carry with you from this hillside, from this passage, from this word that has been waiting 2,000 years for you to find it. The first is this: the wide road is not wrong because it is sinful. It is wrong because it is directionless. Most people who walk the wide road are not walking it defiantly. They are not shaking their fists at God as they go. They are walking it the way most of us walk most of our roads. By default. By inertia. Because it was there, and it was smooth, and nobody asked them to stop and choose. The wide road does not require a decision. It only requires the absence of one, and the absence of a decision is still a choice. It is just a choice you made without noticing you were making it. Jesus is not describing two kinds of people. He is describing two kinds of mornings. Two kinds of ordinary days. The morning you drift toward whatever is easiest and most frictionless, and the morning you stop and turn and ask where the narrow gate is and walk toward it even when the walking costs you something. You will have both kinds of mornings. The question is which kind you are having more of. The second thing, the narrow road is not hard because God is cruel. It is hard because thlipsis, the pressing, the affliction, the friction of being formed, is the only process that makes a human soul into something capable of holding what God wants to give it. You cannot pour something heavy into a container that has never been strengthened. You cannot trust something precious to a character that has never been tested. The narrow road is not punishment. It is preparation, and the pressing you feel on that road, the friction, the resistance, the moments when the wide road looks reasonable and the narrow one looks like too much. That pressing is not evidence that you are on the wrong road. It is evidence that the road is doing what it was designed to do. The gold does not enjoy the refiner's fire. But the gold that comes out the other side of it is gold that can be used for something that matters. Stay on the road. Let it press you. The pressing is not the enemy. The pressing is the point. And the third thing, the one I want you to carry longest, the one I want you to still be thinking about when you close this video and go back to your ordinary life with its ordinary roads and its ordinary choices. You are not trying to squeeze yourself through a crack in a wall. You are walking through a gate that was opened at enormous cost. The narrow gate did not open by accident. It did not open because the theological mathematics worked out. It opened because a man from Galilee, the same man who described it on a hillside, the same man who said with his own mouth, "I am the Pyle," walked the narrowest road any human being has ever walked. He walked it all the way to a cross on a hill outside Jerusalem. He walked it through a tomb cut into rock. He walked it through 3 days of silence that must have felt, to everyone who loved him, like the end of everything. And on the other side of that road, the gate was open. It is still open. Not wide open. Not in the sense of requiring nothing, asking nothing, meaning nothing, but open. Specifically, purposefully, at extraordinary cost. Open. And the word above it, if you could read the Greek carved into the stone, would be heurisco, find, seek and find. Turn toward it and find it turning toward you. This is not a passage about how hard the Christian life is. It is not a passage designed to make you feel guilty for every morning you chose the wrong road. It is a passage about the extraordinary specificity of grace. The grace that is not available everywhere, to everyone, through every gate, in every direction. Not because God is withholding, but because grace has a face, and a name, and a voice that has been calling yours since before you knew there was a narrow gate to find. A few find it, Jesus says. Be among the few, not because you are better than the many. Not because you have earned the right. Not because your theology is correct and your behavior is acceptable and your record is clean. Be among the few because you are the kind of person who, when you hear a voice from a Galilean hillside describing a gate most people walk right past, you stop, you turn, you ask where it is, you walk toward it, even when the walking costs you something. That is heurisco. That is finding. That is the narrow gate, and the narrow road, and the life that waits on the other side of both. If this video helped you see something in this passage you had not seen before, share it with someone who is standing at a gate right now, trying to decide which one to walk through. They may need to hear that the narrow one is not what they think it is. And if you are standing at that gate yourself, right now, today, in whatever ordinary moment you are in, then know this: the gate is open, the road is real, and the one who described it is the same one who walked it first, all the way to the end, so that you would not have to walk it alone. Our heart is restless until it rests in you.